So, welcome back to season 4 of the Entrepreneurial Clinician podcast with another, what I am guessing is going to be timely, informative, insightful, and possibly a little scary podcast episode today. But before I introduce my guest, I would like to acknowledge the country on which I find myself today. This is the land of the Darug people, and I want to pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging, and say thank you for allowing people like me to be able to live on your sacred land. Today, I am interviewing occupational therapist extraordinaire, and he'll hate that I have said that. His name is Brad Williams, and he has one of the most unique businesses of a health professional that I have ever met. And it has been my privilege and my honor to be on the business building journey with Brad. But I'm going to get Brad to explain who he is, who he serves, and what he does, because he will do it more succinctly than I will. So over to you, Brad. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks very much for inviting me on. That was a very interesting journey listening to how you introduced me, because it's probably not how I see myself, but I think that's how a lot of business owners they don't put themselves up there on a pedestal. So thanks for that introduction. Like I said, it's a little bit difficult to hear sometimes. But before I get started, I'll just acknowledge the land that I'm on, which is the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and I pay respect to the spiritual relationship with their country, and acknowledge that the Kaurna people are the custodians of the Adelaide region, which is where I'm coming to you from, and the cultural and heritage beliefs that are still important to the living Kaurna people today. Pay all respects to them and allowing me to be on their land. Who am I? Well, I am an occupational therapist. To start off with, I wasn't always an occupational therapist. I come from a family of small business owners, and I think that's where I got the itch from. It's been a very interesting journey to get to where I am now. But we are a company that works around a very small niche area, but we kind of are very well known for it, especially here in the Adelaide area, for helping people with disabilities to drive and be able to be safe on the road. So this is what I do. How's that for an intro?
That's great. So here in Australia, Brad teaches, not only assesses people to be able to drive and be safe on the roads, he then actually goes a step further and helps organize equipment modifications. And if you want to jump on to Brad's Instagram, it's Williams OT. There is always images of engineering that is out of this world. So if you don't think that people with physical disabilities or cognitive disabilities or learning disorders can or should be able to drive, Brad's going to change your opinion on that. And for those of you thinking, why can't they just use public transport? Because Australia's huge.
I don't know if you've ever tried to catch a bus in Adelaide, for starters, or be able to catch any public transport in Adelaide. You could miss it. It might never come, and it never goes on the journey that you want it to do, because we're so spread out. Everyone lives on quarter-acre blocks, so every house is a long way away. No one's really in high rises, although that's changing in Adelaide as population grows. But buses and public transports don't get you to where you want to go unless you want to go to the city centre and back home from the city centre. So no, it doesn't work.
No, public transport's not always the option. And let's just be real and honest. In Australia, it's a safety concern to be able to drive, but it's also your quality of life. You want to be able to go and watch a footy match, especially if you live in red dirt Australia.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, I mean, one of my best stories is that we got a client get hand controls in their car. We were debating, how are you going to do this without a wheelchair hoist to get your wheelchair in and out of his convertible Mercedes? He said, I don't care. I don't care about that. Once I'm in my car, I'm driving. I'm not getting out. I don't want to get out until I get back home again. And one of the
Oh.
biggest highlights for him was to actually go through the McDonald's drive-through. That was his
Oh,
highlight, and it makes a
wow.
difference.
It does make a difference. And I like I've always been incredibly passionate about you doing this work, because not only do you help clients individually, you've now built team, you're in our one of our leading universities teaching them how to do this work, you are part of a foundation about road safety, and you're also a dad and a husband.
Anyway, yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah. um, there's I read something just this week, and it was very, very interesting, about being a business owner. There's been a study done that if you show a picture of your kids,
Mm-hmm.
certain parts of your brain light up.
Yeah.
If you show the same picture to a business owner of their business logo, the
Yeah.
same part of their brain lights up. And I think,
Mm.
yep, that's very, very interesting, and probably very, very true for how I am. It's like a fourth kid that
Mm.
competes with my kids.
Mm.
Unfortunately for them, they understand that as well. But yeah, it's very interesting reading that today this week, and I thought it was very timely that I'm being interviewed about this.
Yes, I think so too. So when I reached out to you, I wanted you to specifically talk into how organizations or large government organizations here in Australia, or regulators, but large insurance companies, when they make a decision, the impact that it can have on our business, because it happened significantly for you during COVID years and lockdown. And you navigated that, but it's potentially happening to you again with proposed changes to our NDIS scheme. And so we like to think that we can be immune to this, but we can't. We can't be immune as business owners to the economic and political climates in which we operate. So this is going to be a different discussion today, but I really hope that you stick around, because you're going to help understand the soup that we swim in as health professionals in terms of
Like
where
that.
referrals come from. You like that? The soup that we
I
swim in?
like that. I like that.
Because sometimes it feels like we're on, the highest setting, and sometimes it's like, oh, did someone even switch us on today? Anywho. So,
Yeah.
Brad, can you start with maybe a bit of a personal story about burnout for you? Like, have you ever thought that it's been something that's been in your life?
Very timely right now. It's um yeah, it's a struggle at this current point in time. But I'm an optimist, and that's, I think,
Mm,
what a lot of successful business owners are. They're doers, they're shakers, they're looking for the positives in the world. I think people that are not optimistic about the future do tend to call it quits a lot
yeah.
earlier than optimistic people. People. I'm definitely not a perfectionist either. That's another trait that I think is something that is very important to understand. It doesn't need to be absolutely 100% perfect before you
Mm,
roll it out, and we need to
mm,
test it and try it and figure it out as we go.
mm, mm.
Um, as hard as that is for the employees that I've got, because they want to know exactly what they're doing. They want to know exactly what they're doing when they come to work each day.
Yeah.
But when people change policies and procedures on you that are out of your control, you've got to adapt. You've got to
Mm,
change. You've got to figure it out, and you've got to roll with the punches or swim through
mm.
the soup, as you
Yes.
said. You've got to roll from left to right. You got to go up and down to try and figure out what the path through is, to the other side, and it constantly changes. It's like there's the light, but you just
Mm,
can't ever get to the light because you're getting really close, and then a policy changes, and then that light gets a little bit more distant again.
mm, mm,
But I don't think we'll ever get to that light. I think the light is just if you're if you're
mm,
trying to get to the point of excellence, once you get there, I think your journey's over. I think that's
mm,
that's the end, and I don't think you can ever get there because we're always in the pursuit of excellence.
mm,
So
mm,
um, yeah, it just makes it very hard when people have big policy changes, and that's
mm,
happened Just very, very recently
Mm,
for us here, especially in the driving world in Australia,
mm,
who are helping people with disabilities. The NDIS have rushed through a new reform bill, which
mhm,
has going to have massive implications to lots of people in the NDIS world, whether you're a business owner, a provider, or a participant.
mhm,
There's going to be a lot of change and adaptation to how the insurance company works,
mm,
and from the government, and it's going to be like a snow globe for a while. It's going to
mm,
be really shaken up, and there's going to be lots of things floating in the air until it
mm,
all settles down again, and we're in
mm,
that immediate straight after you shake the snow globe
mm.
point, and we've got to ride through that until it all settles down and we all know what we're doing.
Wow.
And of course, in those shaky periods, that's when you go, what am I doing this for?
Mm,
Why am I doing this?
mm,
And then you remind yourself of those whys. It's not the job that you're doing, it's why you're doing it. Like being
mm,
able to drive through a drive-through for the first time since having an accident. Those little
mm.
things are what keep you going.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and now I've got a team of it. We get more of those hits of dopamine every day,
Mm,
which is really, really good. Even though it's not me personally doing it, I get to enjoy my clinicians' joy.
mm.
Um, and seeing the joy on their face gives me joy, which is great.
Yeah, it is great. So at the moment, what you're talking about is here in Australia, our national National Disability Insurance Service has decided that it wants to significantly reduce eligibility and funding for people with disabilities to be able to safely drive in
They want
Australia.
to cut
Uh,
costs. Yeah.
yeah, because nobody thought about the funding of this thing. Thanks, Julia, for getting it through. That was awesome, but nobody thought about funding this thing. Anywho, but here in Australia, we don't have any other private or public mechanism without extremely long waiting lists, stupidly long waiting lists. Like you won't be eligible for a license because of your age type waiting list. So there's actually no other mechanism to pay that helps fund people get this service in Australia. It's not the cheapest service, as you can imagine. Getting a car modified, it has to be done in like specifically. It's not like just sticking a sticker on a mirror. And the assessments, they're probably beyond quite a lot of people with disabilities reach, because we also know that people living with disability have lower rates of employment, they have higher costs of living, they have other secondary things as well. So how this is going to relate to the rest of the world listing, because if you're going, this is only an Australian experience, can I please remind you, particularly those of you who live in the USA, of what happens every time one of your major insurance companies stops sending you money or decides that they're using a whole new code, or the next time the people try to hack your Medicaid. In the UK, this happens to you with your NHS. So we are not immune to the changes that government make when they ask us to do this work. So Brad, coming back to you, so these were in COVID times and now just more recently. So that's a big hit in like 4 years to have to go through this twice, right? Have there been personal costs to you that you're happy to share with us?
Oh, personal costs. It depends on how you actually measure that. If you're talking about me personally,
Mm-hmm.
I have less hair that's much grayer. Um, I have a bigger belly because I don't have as much time to get to the gym as what I used to. So they're personal costs. I've got to start really thinking about my health again, and making sure that I stay on top of that so I don't end up having an early stroke or heart attack or something like that just because
Mm,
you can let things slip. You get home exhausted, and reach for the packet of chips or
mm.
crisps, depending on where you're listening to this, or reach for the bottle of alcohol of some sort to
Mm,
just help you relax at the end of the night, and try to drift off to sleep. You gotta look after yourself, and that's a personal thing that have to stay on top of all the time. Um, I try to set real good boundaries, Joe. I
Mm.
really do. I have made it a thing that I will never work on a weekend.
Mm.
And I have tried my absolute best to do that. I also make sure that I am there for my kids
Mm.
in different ways. Um, I put my hand up to be a coach, so I have to get out of the business at night and go and
Mhm.
do coaching. Um, so I coach two different basketball teams, and make sure that I go out and do scoring for my daughter's netball whenever I can and not at basketball, those
Mm.
type of things. So I make sure I sign myself up and put my hand up for those things. So I'm forced to get out of the business and move
Mm.
away and switch
Mm.
off and
Mm.
make sure I'm invested in my kids' life. So that's one way that I try to look after myself, to make sure that I yeah, don't fall into a trap of working stupid hours, all the time,
Mm.
and I have to make it fit within. I've got inverted commas here, reasonable business hours,
Mm. Mm.
because they're not 9 to 5, that's for sure. They're not
Mm.
8 hours a day. I certainly do more than that, and I certainly am doing bits and pieces. Once the kids have gone to bed, I'm flicking and checking and making sure, and doing the Instagram posts that you referred to earlier. Um, but yeah, the personal costs are more. Mental health
Mm.
is can be tricky at times.
Mm.
But
Mm.
I'm an optimist, so I'm always looking for the silver lining and what might be.
Mhm.
And I think that just keeps me healthy as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like you're fairly aware of your own needs. So I just, how do you engage your kids or your family in periods of extra stress in the business for you? Do you shut them out? I know that's not the answer because but I'm just really curious
Right.
to know, because we know that connection helps protect, it's protective against mental health and
Yeah.
protective against burnout. So how do you do that? How do you navigate that?
Um, yeah, my wife keeps me pretty honest.
Mm-hmm.
She tells me when I'm too distracted, and will tell me to go for a run or a walk or something like that and get my head in the game of being back around the family, and stop
Nice.
thinking about work. So that certainly helps. I do come home and I am distracted thinking about work, when I
Mm,
shouldn't be.
mm,
And that's why those extracurricular activities are really good, because I have to engage with those and I have to switch
mm,
off from work.
mm.
It's very easy to not be engaged around the dinner table, or I think it's like the generation where you got to flick through
Yeah.
your phone. I've got to have
Yeah.
that distraction to keep my mind away from things. Um, so
Mm,
yeah, it's very easy to get distracted and let myself sink back into, that type of overthinking about work and not switching off. But yeah, my wife keeps me pretty honest and tells me she can see when I'm, overthinking stuff or distracted by things that are happening at work. But I actually don't work from home, which is, I think, really
mm,
good. I used to work from
mm.
home. I used to have, well, when you first met me, Joe, I was working out of a shed.
Yes.
When I first met you, the shed wasn't even lined, and it was either hot or like freezing cold, and I'd be wearing an overcoat, or sweating it up in some shorts and a singlet type of thing. Um, and then I insulated it, and then it was much better.
Mm,
It's kind of full circle. This is
yeah.
actually, very similar now. I'm actually in, a little extra pod, and I feel like, I've done full circle. We've done a business, we've got a business, and now I'm isolated out in this little business pod, where we can get. But it's a bit like a shed, which is very interesting. But I think being separated from work and
Mm,
actually having the journey to travel to and from
mm,
work
mm,
is excellent for me.
mm,
I use that to, listen to. I'm hopeless. I listen to work podcasts or work books. I never listen to
mm,
the radio, but it lets me think about work in a different way, not in the
Mm,
chaos of the day, not
mm,
thinking about the doom and gloom, or the things that I have to fix, or the things that have to be addressed tomorrow when I on the way to or from work.
mm,
I listen to these books for inspiration about what's positive for tomorrow, and what can I look forward to tomorrow, rather than what not to look forward to tomorrow, and how can we build, and how can we be the best that we can possibly be in this area. So the journey, whether it's traffic or not traffic, it can vary from 20 minutes to 45 minutes, is really good for me.
mm.
Really good.
I appreciate you saying that, because it's actually really good for me too. And when we were looking for what is now our home, one of the criteria was I needed an office space, which I now refer to as my studio, away from the living parts of the house. And I don't have, uh, there's no internal entry into my house from here. I actually have to physically lock the doors, leave the house, walk up the stairs to get
Yeah.
into the that's been a gift for me, being able to have that physical shut off. I really appreciate that. Do your kids notice when you're less with them
Yeah.
or less present? Yeah. Do they let you know, hey, Dad, can you come back to the room?
Um, my daughter does.
Right.
She's
Nice.
very into it. I think the 18-year-old son, he's separate anyway. Now he's
Yeah.
a little
Wow.
bit, we're trying to get him engaged with us, let alone me
Yes.
being engaged with the family. It's the 15-year-old daughter that certainly keeps me honest.
Mm,
Yeah, she definitely questions. The 11-year-old is where 12-year-old now is where I
mm,
dedicate all of my basketball time and coaching and things like that. So he gets the best end of the deal,
right.
because I'm spending a lot of time with him, traveling all over the place, and coaching, engaging, and talking
Mm,
about basketball nonstop with him.
mm,
Um, yeah, it's my 15-year-old daughter that lets me know when I'm
mhm.
a little bit off color, or things like that. But she also questions me about life and politics, and philosophy and things like that as well. So it's good to have that. But yeah, no, she
Okay.
she certainly does, and yeah, she keeps me honest. That's for sure.
It sounds like you might have done this accidentally, but it actually sounds like you've helped your family, you've empowered your family members to help you navigate these stressful times, because you're the primary income earner, right?
Yeah, I mean, my wife works part time as well, but yeah, she
Yeah,
does it
but
part time so she can manage the family around my business,
uh,
because
it,
I'm
it,
engaged here more often. Yeah.
that's right. So, but it sounds like you have like really empowered your family members to go, hey, Brad, not okay. Hey, Dad, can you turn up and be in the room again? Can
I
you?
don't
You've
think
done
I,
that in a
I don't
way
think
what's
I empowered them. I don't think I empowered them. They
oh,
empowered themselves to say, "Oi, come back to work, come back to family, and get
yeah.
out of work." They empowered themselves, and I welcomed it.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Like you've welcomed it and made it safe for them to say that, right?
Yeah.
It's not like you're gonna fly off the handle or make them feel guilty because they exist and you've got work to do. Like you can just some of those, unfortunately that was my childhood experience, but you've created that environment. So you've actually helped this protective mechanism, the protective mechanism in your community, your family, your support people. You've actually empowered them to go, this is how I need you to help me stay protected. That's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
it's a balancing act. This year has been one
Yeah.
of the toughest. Other than other
Ah.
than COVID, and we can unpack COVID. That was just chaos. This year has been. Um, I saw a picture on Facebook, and I shared it in February, but it's
Mm,
still going. And this one, we're in September, of a kid that on one of these playground things, and he
mm,
keeps getting whacked in the back of the head every time he stands up with this thing
mm.
rotating around and around, and it just keeps knocking the kid over. And it said, "My 2024." I feel like that's still happening this year. We've had a practice manager be extremely sick,
Oh.
and then after close to 8 months, then resigned because she wasn't able to continue doing her work, which is very unfortunate. But I've basically been doing two roles now
Mm,
for close to 8 months, and not knowing, not knowing,
yes.
not knowing. So you couldn't move forward. That's been extremely difficult. We've had, like we've said, massive changes in policies and procedures around the place, and the goalposts keep moving. So you don't know what you're aiming for. Um, it's been a very, very difficult year this year. So I've probably pushed those boundaries with my family the most this year. And I think I probably have taken advantage of them getting a little bit older and a little bit more
Mm,
independent. And then therefore allowing myself to slip into taking an extra hour at work rather than having an extra hour at home, which has probably been to the detriment this year. But always hopeful, and just employed a brand new practice manager that starts next week. So we're
Yahoo!
getting it's
Congratulations.
one of these things where we always look for the positive, and
Mm,
I set my goals on the times where I can, yeah, be more engaged and back with the family as quick as possible for that extra hour a day.
yeah. So you kind of knew that it wasn't going to be a forever thing, but you didn't really know when it was going to end.
No, yeah, it's I set up a business org chart,
Mm,
and it's very important for me to recognize when I'm wearing too many
yeah,
hats,
right.
and that I have to employ somebody to put that hat on, or put that
Mm,
hat on. I still wear too many hats. I understand that, but it's one of these things where I have to delegate that hat to somebody else. I have
yeah.
to have somebody help me with that, and I cannot wear that burden. And having that visual organization chart is vital for that.
Beautiful. Well, that's a great tip there, everybody. Have your own personal organizational chart. And if you saw how many
Doesn't
hats
matter
you were
how small your
wearing,
business is.
yeah,
Doesn't
that's
matter
actually
how.
very cool.
One of the things that I did that changed how I view my business and help growth, is
Mm,
actually do an organization chart that highlights every facet of the business. So
mm,
finance manager,
mm,
that's me. Marketing manager, that's me. Operations manager, that's not going to be me, which is great. CEO, clinical lead. They're
mm,
all of these positions that should or could be replaced by somebody else. You can't wear all those hats, and if you put your name in every single box, you can quickly see why you're swimming through soup. You're going in every
yeah,
direction all the time. Yeah,
yeah. That's
it's one of the best things I've ever done.
Yeah, that's a really, really cool. I've got all sorts of visions of tools now. So look out for the Brad inspired org chart for a small allied health business. So Brad, talk us through COVID. Talk us through what it was like for you. And I'm doing this retrospective on purpose,
Yeah.
everybody. So talk us through it. What was it like for you?
Um, well, I'm an optimist. Thank goodness I wasn't in Victoria,
Well, that is
because that
true.
was that
Yes.
was extremely difficult. Just at the start of
Mm,
2020, we opened a little. Somebody came to me and said, "Brad, I really want to work for you," and they were in Victoria, in Geelong. And I said, "Yeah, oh, awesome, excellent, fantastic. We can start branching out and see if we can take this around Australia. We'll use this as our test ground." So that was in January 2020.
oh no.
Of course, in April, uh, the world really changed in
Mm,
2020.
mm,
Um, that we tried and tried and tried to keep that afloat, but we just couldn't, with the extended, really big,
lockdowns.
long
Yeah.
term lockdowns uh, in Melbourne. We just
Mm,
couldn't keep her
mm,
going. Unfortunately, there was the government here was amazing
mm.
in the first periods of um, COVID. It was very unknown, but then they
Mm,
had payouts for small businesses, which were
yeah,
amazing. And
yeah.
Williams OT probably wouldn't be here without those to
Mm,
help
mm,
compensate for wages. That was amazing. But everyone went into scare mode, and
yeah.
we were in 2020, at the same time, just after I took on that contractor in Victoria, my senior OT said, Brad, I'm packing up and retiring and going to travel around Australia.
Oh.
All right, no worries. I'm good on you. Fantastic. That's awesome. So that was in January when we came back from Christmas leave.
Mm,
I'm finishing up in March, which was really good timing.
mm.
And then also in January and February, my two other OTs at that time, I had one extra OT, but two of my other OTs both told me they were pregnant, and they were they were yeah they were going to take leave for raising their kids, and they were casual and contract at that point, so there was no long term. So um, only had four OTs at that time, part timers, and that was all at the start of
Oh my
2020.
goodness. We hadn't even had
So
masks come out of the cupboard yet.
that was before COVID was really a problem,
Yes.
and
Yes.
then COVID hit, which sped up the ladies going on pregnancy leave, or leave to have their baby. It wasn't safe anymore to do that, so
Mm,
off they went. So it was just me and basically a not a new grad OT, but someone newly trained in the driving world, and
mm,
her life was extremely uncertain at that point. I had too many admin staff, not enough
oh,
OTs to pay for them. And the big kicker is that at that point of time, it was almost impossible to find staff. Who wants to
mm,
leave the position that they're actually in a world of flux
mm,
and turmoil and so
mm,
forth? So yeah, 2020, I try not to think about it, Joe. And
mm,
it was a very, very difficult 6 months, the first 6 months.
mm,
Extremely, extremely difficult. Um, just not knowing what was going on. We tried to get a staff member came, we employed somebody new, came over from Victoria, coming back home, and was
mm,
able to come out of Victoria and go through some isolation and so forth. But then they were looking to get a job. Very fortunate there, and he got us through a period of paying some wages and so forth. But yeah, that didn't last long. We got through the turmoil of all that period, and he wanted a very stable job, even though we were offering a
mm,
stable job. He thought that a hospital would be a more stable position through that period of
mm,
time,
mm.
and decided to move over into the hospital world. So again, another few months down the track, we were back to me and my fairly new driver trained OT. But then in October, we started to lift all of the restrictions. The world started to open up again. People started to move around, even though we're in
Mm,
masks, and social distancing was a big thing. We started to come back, and people started to relax, and we're able to bounce back. And since that period, it's I actually look at it as a positive, because we are stronger than we were before COVID.
wow.
I think we would have been moving too fast.
Mm,
I was able to reassess. I was able to figure out, the what ifs. If it does all go
mm,
bad, what if? I had a
mm,
exit plan. I had a strategy.
mm,
I had a worst case scenario strand, which gave me the confidence to go forth and prosper, I guess, is
mm,
a way
mm.
that you could say it. Go forth and really be the clinic that I wanted it to be from that point on,
That's
rather than
so
chasing my tail
your
all the
your
time.
optimism is almost contagious, Brad, because I'm sitting here going, huh. So Williams OT as a business has actually been able to reframe the COVID and lockdown experiences as a time of refinement. Like
Yeah,
you,
well, it ended up being that way.
yeah,
I didn't always see it that way, Joe. I
no,
was I was at that point of time, I remember breaking down in front of my practice manager going, what the hell are we going to do?
Yeah.
How do we get through this? This is terrible. And do
Yeah.
we just shut it down? And do we just, figure it out once COVID finishes?
Yeah.
And do we restart then? And she just said, whatever you do, Brad, I got your back. And that was great.
Wow.
And we're able to move forward from there.
Yeah. And I didn't offer that reframe for the people listening as a way of being toxic in my positivity. For me, it was just really interesting because I think we are still living through the consequences of the lockdowns and of the experience of COVID. And that was just a really interesting perspective for me, Brad, because it wasn't easy. It wasn't fun. And it was that we had reasons to be scared. We had this thing in our communities that we didn't understand that could kill us. Like,
Yeah. I'll give you another point of how we're still living through it.
yeah.
The amount of people that cancel their appointments now because they're sick compared to pre-COVID.
Ah. Oh, ouch.
The
Because
amount of people, the amount of cancellations we have
consolations.
now
Yeah.
compared to pre-COVID is chalk and cheese. It is significantly different. It's quadrupled, I think, more than
Wow.
pre-COVID
Mm-hmm,
for
mm-hmm.
the amount of staff that we've got.
Gosh.
That's a real kicker.
Well, it is because that has a direct effect on your income, on your
Absolutely, it
revenue.
does.
Yeah, it's
Absolutely,
like,
absolutely. And when we're not nothing against the physios or the dentists or the things like that out there. We're not a little half hour, 45-minute
mm,
window
mm,
of appointment. We are talking about an initial assessment being a 2-hour appointment with a client, and we're talking about 4 hours of report writing thereafter. So we're
mm.
talking about a 6 to 7 hour window that if it gets cancelled, late notice, that's
Mm,
7 hours, a whole day worth of income
mm.
not being charged. So it has massive consequences in our area.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. I think that's a great statistic to be able to share because I know we often talk about no-shows or cancellations, but understanding the financial impact of your no-shows and your cancellations is huge. And you've just given us something really, I've heard of businesses increasing their revenue by 25% just by adding a re-engagement text before an appointment. Like that's phenomenal. But we've now lived through this environment that says if you're coughing, if you're sneezing, if you're feeling unwell, don't go outside. Stay home until you're well.
So when they get that 48-hour reminder,
Yeah,
they're going, oh yeah, no, I won't be able to make it now because
yeah,
I'm got a bit of a sniffle today.
yeah,
In 2 days' time, I might be more sick, so I'm going to
yeah,
cancel.
yeah.
Yeah,
So we've actually got quite a different approach. In some ways, it's good. Like we don't want really sick people sitting in a car next to us. I'm assuming. I mean, I don't really want
no,
that.
we don't.
Um,
We don't.
but on the same token, like people have now been empowered and have permission to go, I'm not well enough to come. But
Yeah,
us as business owners have gone, ooh, there's implications for this over here. Yeah,
yeah,
huge.
yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a tricky thing, and it's the same with staff as well.
Mm.
No one wants to come to work with a sniffle either
No.
because they don't want to infect somebody else. So there's a whole mindset now, as a business owner,
Yes.
it's a mindset that I respect. I 100% respect it, but boy, it
Mm.
has an impact on turnover. And
Mm.
if we cancel an appointment on a client, then I've got to pay for the staff member and miss
Yes.
out on the
No,
income coming.
in the income.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
So it's
Okay.
a
So
double whammy.
it is a double whammy. And that's a huge, and thank you for that really, really specific, concrete example. Pick the OT in the room, people. So with what your business is experiencing now with these new legislative changes that were rushed through, and yes, I am saying that on purpose, because these consequences of political change are happening all the time. We don't have to wait for an election cycle for us to have consequences. We're experiencing that right now. Nobody does. The government has the power to do the things that it does. So is there a feeling or a sense now like, oh my God, here we go again? I mean, I know you're a really positive guy, Brad, but has there been any of that resurgence around why bother? this is so hard. I don't want to do this anymore.
Yes, Joe.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely, Joe. Absolutely. When I kind of go, oh, I think I've had enough today,
Mm,
and then you realize that you've been the only person in the office for 2 to 3 hours, and you're still going, and you wonder why you're fatigued at the end of the day. And geez, I really need to go home and spend at least a little bit of quality time with my kids before they go off to bed at night.
mm,
Absolutely.
mm.
I could get a job with somebody else and work 9 to 5, no worries.
Yeah.
So why push myself to keep doing this? But being the optimist that I am, Joe, yeah, I look for the positives. As hard as it is for my family, I'm looking for the positives in what we do, and we do amazing stuff. We really do. We're not. I think what's also really beneficial is we're not your typical service.
Yes.
We're a very have to be careful here because we're not allowed. We're a very focused service. We're not allowed to use the
Oh,
word specialized as in
oh my
APRA.
gosh.
One of our governing bodies saying that we're not allowed to be experts or specialists. So I'm not allowed to say that. Very
Okay.
focused and niched area of OT, and there's
Mm,
uh there's there's not many people doing this, so we have long wait lists, and if we're not doing it, who's going to do it? And
yeah.
um it's going to be, yeah, it's one of these things that creates joy in what we do,
Mm.
and why we come to work, and those hits of dopamine are really important and keep you going.
Absolutely. And I was just about to remind you of what you said earlier. So it's great that you feel so grounded and well integrated in like this horrible stuff can keep happening. I am going to question why I'm keeping doing it. I'm allowed to have those feelings. I'm allowed to have those thoughts. But you've got a real sense of mission around if I'm not doing this, if I'm not teaching people how to drive, if I'm not helping people be safe on the road, then who's going to do it? And there really isn't very many of you.
It's not only that, it is the mission and the vision. It's not
Mm,
just that there's no one else doing it. It's the
mm,
vision and mission to make other people's lives better that keep
yeah.
you going. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I still love the idea of one guy's absolute joy in his heart being that he could independently go through a McDonald's drive-through. Like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we just the simple things that you and I take for granted that he hasn't even got an option about. Like we get frustrated because McDonald's is, 2 traffic lights out of the way. And he's like, just let me go in my car by myself. Like that's really
Yeah.
cool.
There's another lady that sticks with me from very
Mm.
early on, and
Mm.
she missed driving to the beach to watch a sunset. And
Oh,
that's all she wanted to do.
yeah.
It wasn't about getting to work. It wasn't
Oh,
about picking up kids. It wasn't about any of those other things. It's the little things that you and I can choose to do on a weekend
yeah.
that she
Yeah.
just wanted to be able to do. It's
Yeah.
not it's not the main things that people think about what they use their car for.
Mm.
The main journeys that people use their car for. People forget about the little things that you use your car for, whether it's going to see a cousin for their birthday, or
Mm.
on a weekend, or being able to pick up somebody from a night out and just drive
Mm.
them home and be that designated driver, or you name it. You use your car for
Mm.
so many things, and hearing those little stories are amazing. And that's why, I don't know if I'm allowed to plug it, I do my own little podcast,
Yes, of course,
driver
please.
doing the Drive Able podcast. It's
Mm.
called Drive Able Podcast. If you go and search for it on all your favorite podcast channels, Joe, um,
Nice.
you'll find the Drive Able podcast. And we interview clients and we understand what journey they've been through and what impact it actually
Mm.
has once they go through that journey. And yeah, it's fantastic.
Isn't it interesting for those of you listening how Brad has been able to direct this conversation back to his values and mission around I want to really serve people really well. It's and I'm sorry to do this reflection in front of you, Brad, because it's going to make you feel awkward, but
It's not about money, Joe. It's not about money, and it's not about those. It's if you're doing it for the money, then you're in it for the wrong reason. It's not
yeah.
about. It's not about putting, even though it's called Williams OT, that's just because that's the first name that came into my head when it was just me as a sole practitioner. Like, what
Yeah.
else am I going to call it when I'm a sole practitioner? I'll just call it Williams
Mm,
OT, and let's get
mm,
this ball rolling. But it's
mm,
not about the money. It's not about the my name on the door. It's not about notoriety or anything else like that.
mm.
Those things come if you're doing a good job and you're living by your mission, and really understanding how you help people is what makes the difference.
Yeah, it really is. But you continue throughout this whole conversation, which has been going for 45 minutes now, you continue to come back to these themes for yourself. So I
Yeah.
think that's really, really powerful and important, because as health professionals, we hear horrible stories day in, day out, week out, year in, year out, right? We
Mhm.
are attuned to the horrible stories. You meet a person that's had a motor vehicle accident, they kind of tell you their story. You meet a person who's now a quadriplegic, they're going to tell you their story for the first time. They're going to tell you. So we're hearing these horrible stories, but you have cultivated a way that your intrinsic mindset now is, I'm going to put the positive stuff in as well. I want to learn. I want to be inspired. I want to be encouraged. I want to be affirmed. And it's almost like it's not a balancing out, but it's also allowing the positive voices to have some extra sound, to be amplified, rather than just all this negativity all the time, right? That is striking for me in this conversation with you today.
If it's an OT thing or whether it's a personality thing, but we are trained as OTs to enhance people's lives, and I
Mm,
think that's I have a lot of the same traits in my own personal life. We're always
mm,
looking to try and enhance and looking for the positives, and trying to enhance the positives rather than concentrate on the negatives, and
yeah.
trying to get the most out of what we can do rather than worrying about what we can't do.
And worrying about all of those things that are out of your control. I
That's right.
think
Yeah.
that's been really eye-opening for me, because I've been doing this season, and my own reflection and my own learning in preparation for a book that I'm going to write. I'm looking for these protections that people are using, not the ones that are prescribed, because they're actually not working. But so, it's not about, one negative conversation, therefore I need a positive conversation to counteract that. It's almost like, I don't listen to the radio. I don't want to waste my time on that. I'm not a big fiction reader. I don't think you do fiction at all. It's like you're really intentional about the stuff going into your head. Really intentional. Yeah, would that
Can't
be accurate?
remember that. Can't remember the last news bulletin that I ever
Mm,
watched or listened to. I just
mm,
do not have time for that type of media. I
yeah.
really don't. Um, you know, I don't learn about horrific things that are happening in the world until my family tell me. Basically,
Mm,
I don't I don't have time for that type of media, and I as ignorant as it is, I kind of learnt about the NDIS reform that we've been referencing about 3 or 4 days later than everybody
yeah.
else, because I just I just don't engage in that type
Mm,
of media. I really don't. If it's important, it'll get to me. I'm sure it'll get to me in the long run if it's important. Um,
that's really cool.
so yeah, I just don't have time for that kind of negative storylines. I really
Mm.
don't. I'm always looking to try and build on what we've got.
So, question now, a little bit left of center, and certainly not in the suggested questions I sent to you. Ha ha ha. How do you help your team members adopt a similar mindset?
Oh, great question. It's
Yeah.
tricky.
Yeah,
It's
I
tricky
know.
because not everybody, even if they're OTs, not everybody has the same mindset for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. And the biggest turnover we have in staff, though, are our admin staff
Mm,
who are not being trained OTs. So I think there actually is something in it.
yeah.
Um, we don't employ any other health professional. We don't employ
Mm,
speeches or physios or anything else like that. But the highest turnover of staff and that struggle with the changes are the other admin staff. So
Wow.
I think there's actually something in that.
Yeah.
And it is very hard for some people to ignore the negatives and concentrate on the positives. But I try to lead by example,
Yeah.
and
Nice.
we in our business I've made it a very conscious effort to make sure that I am checking in all the time. So I don't know if you want me to go into how I
Mm,
do that or not, but I've got a formal way of making sure that I'm there for my staff and not being distracted by stuff. It's very,
mm.
very important for me that I do that.
Yeah, great. Oh, nice reflections. Wow. This has been such a powerful and insightful conversation today. Is there anything about this topic of burnout or being overwhelmed at work that you want to add to this conversation? So maybe think about it this way. If you had a new graduate OT come to you and say, Brad,
Mhm.
how do you stop from being burnt out? What are you going to say to them?
Um, Reflective practice is very important. So that
Yeah.
the reflecting not on the negatives, but try to reflect on the positives.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Acknowledge the negatives, acknowledge the hard days, acknowledge that they're there. Try to figure out why it might have started, but making sure that you don't ignore the positive days and the positive
nice.
things. And that's a reason why we do the podcast, is that
Yeah.
we want to talk to people about what the end result actually meant to them.
Mm, mm.
And we're checking in with clients, and um, I look at I've never really thought about this before, but we actually having the vehicle modifications part of the business and the licensing, and we're not just
Yeah.
doing the
Ooh.
assessments and prescribing.
Yeah.
We actually get to see the end part of the journey as well.
Mm,
We
mm,
actually get to not just prescribe what's going to go out there as an OT, which is what
mm,
happens a lot of the time, especially in the driving world. We actually
mm,
get to see it all the way through, and we get to
mm,
wave goodbye to them as they drive away with their car, and see them drive, home for the first time in their new car with their new license, and get to enjoy that feeling, really, really raw feelings of how successful that was, and it makes you feel really good. So making sure that
wow.
you take time to dwell on the positive
Mm,
and actually sit and think about the positives and those
mm. I
enjoy
wonder
those
what
immensely. Make
I
time
want.
for it. I do a
Yeah,
podcast to make time.
that's right. Nice. And I was just about to think, I wonder what type of change we could experience in our workplaces, therefore this industry, if we ruminated on the good stuff.
Yeah,
I think that would be powerful.
absolutely.
And
I try to do it as a practice for myself, but I think our internets are getting a little bit delayed, so I
yeah,
apologize, Joe, if that's an issue at my end. But I make
we'll work it
sure
out.
that I do that with my team. So
Mm,
every month we have a monthly meeting, and every quarter I take each one of my staff members out for an individual lunch, and we reflect on the quarter that's been.
nice, nice. Our internet is becoming increasingly unstable, but I think that's a really good place to end this interview today. But I do have two important questions. So the first one, how do people find out about you? Where do they go on the World Wide Web to find Brad Williams of Williams OT?
Just search for Williams OT, Williams
Yeah,
Occupational Therapy.
yeah.
We're probably on too many platforms, but we're out there. Just search for it. We're on YouTube, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. We're not on Snapchat. They're just go looking for Williams OT or the Drive Able podcast, which is the podcast
Mm,
platform where we interview these people. Uh,
yeah, that's
we're easy to find.
Yeah. And if you really want to learn how to create content that is relevant to your niche, you just need to be watching Brad, because he really has nailed the whole, is this relevant for my audience? Is this helpful for my audience? And he even has a Friday funny, which is actually really funny. So that's the first question answered. The second question, when we finally get to meet each other in real life again, what's your coffee order and has it changed from when I first met you? What's your coffee order, Brad?
It has it has changed, Joe. I used to be so for people that don't know, I was a baker as my first job, and I was working ridiculous hours overnight. I became addicted to coffee, trying to keep myself stimulated to get through a shift and then get through the next day and then fall asleep late at night. But so yeah, I've always had coffee. When I was a baker, it was non-stop iced coffee, iced coffee after iced coffee after iced coffee. I was also fairly large at that point as well. And then once I got into this world, it was still iced coffees or in uni time and things like that. But then I started having, I wanted to lose the weight, so I cut the milk out and I went to long blacks, and I was definitely a long black man for a very long time. But as I'm getting older, I get heartburn, Joe, and I hate it.
Yes.
I hate heartburn. And so I've started adding milk back in again to make it a bit less bitter.
Truth be told, that's the reason why I drink macchiatos rather than espressos. I actually need the milk to stop the heartburn too. Brad, thank you so much for your time.
I'm getting old.
Thank you so much for your time and your energy, your insights today. This has been a great conversation. I invite you to search out Brad, just watch what he's doing, because you'll actually learn a lot about how to be a health professional human being and father in this business that we call health. So this has been the Entrepreneurial Clinician Podcast. Until next time, go be your flawsome self.